There we go.
Oh. I declare the meeting open. I'd like to first do the acknowledgement of country. Council acknowledges traditional custodians of the land where we work and live. Council celebrates the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing culture, connections to the land and waters of the New South Wales Central Tablelands. Mr. GM, could you read out the issues in relation to the recording of the meetings, please?
Members and the public are advised that the proceedings of this meeting, other than any confidential matters, are being recorded and made publicly available on the council website, and persons attending the meeting should refrain from making any defamatory statements.
Thank you. Mr. GM, do we have any apologies?
We do have apologies from Member Fry and Member Ring.
I've moved the second of members. Member McKibben, Member Capel, all four. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 16th of April 2021. Can I move a second of members? Member Capel, Member McKibben, all four. Against, carried. Thank you, councillors. Do we have any disclosure of interest, Mr. GM?
No, Mr. Chairman, not at this stage.
Can I move a second of members? Member McKibben, Member Leslie, all four. Against, carried. Thank you. We'll move into manager reports. Councillors. Item 1, statement of investments as of May 31st, 2021. There's a recommendation there. Can I move the second of councillors? Member McKibben, Member Capel. Any commentary, councillors? Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good financial position we're in. One disappointment that was, as far as I understood, agreed was that we were supposed to receive the consolidated accounts reports as well, i.e. how much money we had in total, which hasn't been provided. So again, that's just my disappointment after an agreement. I understood previous meetings that was to be provided.
Mr. GM.
Mr. Chairman, I have continued to mention the amount of cash on hand, but very specifically in the regulations, this is about investments only, and I don't want to misrepresent the position by putting graphs in as other councils may do, but just because other councils do it, as I said previously, doesn't make it right.
Mr. Chair, moving forward, would we be able to have potentially a second part to a report come to before council each and every time it maybe explains that position that Member Reynolds has asked for?
Mr. Chairman, I certainly could, and I'd prefer to maintain the integrity of the report to put as an attachment, maybe.
Member Reynolds, would you?
As long as it's stated.
Yep. Other members, would you be happy with that? Okay, I won't put it down as an our recommendation if we can you record that. Thank you very much. Any other comments, members? No? All four? Against, carried. Item 2, operational plan. Councillors, I have spoken to the General Manager and Member Reynolds about this. Member Reynolds has put in a notice of motion within that it was a decision motion. I've asked Member Reynolds, I see it as a submission to our operations plan as we do in normal councils, and I'm allowed as a submission to put it in time, and as a result, Member Reynolds, it'll be part of our operational plan because normally as a submission, you talk about it in the operational plan. Member Reynolds was happy with that. The General Manager, I advised him before the meeting what I was doing because I believe the best place for it is under the annual operations plan. Now, we do have a recommendation there, and as I said, I'm accepting Member Reynolds' submission. So it's a submission at this stage as part of this report. So recommendation, can I have a move in a second before we move into discussions?
So I'd like some clarification on that issue. Surely the issue of the fee should be determined because we're actually approving, we're adopting it.
Yeah.
And we've had submissions because that's been on exhibition. So should we not actually be asking for, if anything, for deferring this item until the other items being determined one way or the other?
Well, I can make a determination to move it as part of this because it is something that in all, and I've sat down with a couple of GMs to discuss this, that in essence, it is a submission because it's asking us to review what we put out to the community for commentary. So this is what we do, and that's what you do when it comes back to council, to have commentary on that matter. Now, the other thought, you could have done suspension of standing orders, gone to that. Yes, it may well have been approved or not, whatever the case may be. This way it's dealt with in the point within here. Member Reynolds was happy with that. And as I said, I'm treating it as a submission within this operations plan of council. What, as Member Reynolds just said to me about 10 minutes ago, he said, I mean, whether the vote goes that way or not, if it does go the way Member Reynolds said, the option is for us here today, and I've said to GM, there's where would that money come from, or I can have that part of our document put to an extraordinary meeting, because we can fit it in before the end of June for that part of with the operations plan, with the changes made to be done before the close date. So if it gets up here today and we want to have more discussion at it, I can put it in an extraordinary meeting. If it doesn't get up, it doesn't change anything here today. I put that to Member Reynolds because he was the one who moved it, and I said he's got. I'm prepared to give him the room to discuss it in more detail here.
Mr. Chair, may I just get some more clarification?
Yes.
Normally, from my understanding, and we've been looking at submissions in my council
Yep.
with regard to the budget.
Yep.
And people put in submissions on different items.
Yep.
When we go to approve the budget, we can make modifications to the recommendation. So instead of accepting the budget, we could make a modification for to an allowance for someone to pay less fees or something for a particular thing, which is in the budget. That would be approved. You don't need to defer or have a special meeting about that. So why is there a difference with this particular submission and what we would normally do?
There's not a difference. What I'm saying is, if councillors wanted more thoughts of where we could pull the money from, there's some thoughts where potentially, because it's approximately about $16,000, where that would come from. We'd have to pull out of one area to put it across. So councillors wanting more depth detail. As I said, if it was to get up, like in your words, and you wish to discuss it more, I could call an extraordinary meeting and come in and discuss it. But that's all conjecture to what may happen here. But fully understand, because that's where it comes in. There's a lot of councils, I believe, in their documentation I've seen, it's brought up there, and I think a lot of councils say, no, we're not changing anything to our operations plan. If this was, this money could be pulled out of, expenditure account or whatever. So, councillors, could I move a second so we can get into debate on this, please? Member Reynolds, Member McKibben. Member Reynolds, you like to?
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the potential modification, and I'll come to funding in a minute.
Yes.
But firstly, in looking at remuneration for the job that my fellow county councillors, myself, and yourself as chair undertake, is very, very low in remuneration. Now, I've tried to compare against other county councils and what the expectations, and I've had a look at a few videos of other county councils in operation. I've also talked, my council has another county council in operations, being the Central Tablelands Border. It's a member of, with two other councils to the west. And their remuneration is close, and they're allowed to have a higher remuneration than this county council because of the classification. So the classification is different for that county council, but they're near the top of their classification. And I think it's around about $10,000 per county councillor. Now, out of this, if this recommendation gets up, myself and the current county councillors benefit very little. It's to actually try and entice for the next county council some skilled or qualified councillors to actually take a look at this county council as an operation. Personally, the amount of time that I spend on this organisation, I'm probably getting about $5 an hour in remuneration, which is well below the minimum wage. And we as county councillors over the last 3.5 years have done the heavy lifting. We've worked with the general manager and previous general manager and yourself as chair to make this county council a standout county council. So when it comes to the Biosecurity Act, I think no other county council has even come in close to this. And that's taken a lot of work and effort and expertise by a number of our fellow county councillors. So while it's only a small extra remuneration, while it's a doubling of the remuneration, it's not a substantial amount of remuneration, but a recognition and reward for the members of this county council that have time and time again gone above and beyond what I consider is the need and what most other Weeds County councils do in trying to get some positive outcomes for our community. Because we're, as councillors or county councillors, approached as members to talk with farmers about what we're doing, how we're doing it, etc. So we also represent this organisation back in our local councils, but then also in other local councils as well. So I've moved this rescission motion. I would have liked to have discussed this in a workshop, but sadly it wasn't put up as noticed in a workshop beforehand to look at remuneration and what may be a valid number, but it is about half of the maximum amount allowed, from my understanding, of what could be given to county councillors. So I'm strongly supporting some form of remuneration, but as I said, increase. But as I said, it's going to benefit the next county councillors because our term finishes in September, and so the next county councillors may actually receive some slightly extra remuneration. So personally, I'm going to gain very little out of this decision at this stage unless I decide to run for council and then run for this county council again. So I hope my fellow county councillors consider that some form of increase in remuneration is justified, given that this organisation has turned a profit of, I think it was around about 100,000 in 2019, 44,000 in 2020, and projected at this stage on the third quarter QBRS at around $100,000 profit, which again, I'd rather not see a profit. I'd rather see that money actually used in weed inspections and other things. But financially, and the budget for next financial year, so coming to where we could potentially get expenditure or funding for this, the budget is currently projected to have a $41,000 surplus approximately. So taking this amount of money out of the budget, we would still have a projected surplus of $25,000. So it's not as though we're having to borrow or take it out of reserves, we're taking out of operational funding to actually remunerate the county councillors to the tune of $4,000, and yourself as a county councillor, you would also receive the $4,000 if you were to accept it, plus your chair allowance on top of that. So that's the background to this decision motion, which has turned into a submission to the county council with the budget process. I will leave it there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments about everyone's hard work, because that's something I've been saying for a long time. Is every member in here, the job that's been done in the last 4 years has been tremendous. Members, any other commentary?
I agree with Councillor Reynolds. I don't think there's anything more that I can add. The workload in this council term has been substantially higher than previous council terms, and it is well within the limits of what can be done. And I think the extra $16,000 should go to the members of this council and reward for the work that they put into it.
Thank you. Any other members? Yes. Member Coe? Sorry.
I do have some hesitations, Mr. Chairman. This has come at a fairly late stage, and I don't know about other councils, but we certainly haven't had the opportunity to discuss this with our council. I just wonder how the member councils will feel about us voting ourselves what is a substantial increase in remuneration. I did mention it to a couple of councils, or the deputy mayor this morning, and he, I have to say, was quite startled, and his approach was not humorous in any way. I think there certainly has been a lot of work done during the term of this council, and I think that the heavy work is probably done. We've set up the framework over the last 4 years,
for the council to be able to operate in the way that we want it to be. And I think a lot of that work will now fall back onto the management side of the council. Now that the policy has been set up by the council. And Mr. Chairman, I hesitate to say that I am against it, but I am a little uncomfortable, I have to say.
Leslie?
If this is a rescission motion that's now been converted into a notice of submission, what was the original motion? What was the original decision?
Increase the fees in accordance with the government 2% government.
That's not what this is.
This is
Yes, read that out, please. Would you like to read that, please?
So part B of the submission?
No, that's fine actually, because that's what I thought we had done to take the 2%.
To take the 2%,
That's
yes.
what I thought. But this is
Yeah.
this is
To put it that extra figure to $4,000, which is just above double. Any more?
that's fine. No, I was just clarifying my mind.
I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I have mixed feelings on this. I've probably expended considerable time on this up at Macquarie County Council, probably as much as anyone else as a member. And I do see that time continuing, because as you're aware from the late reports coming out, we're just at the moment of getting into that area of dealing with government and how we're going to get some funding, or how we're going to deal with the compliance and enforcement once the PINs are not observed. So I can't go into too much because obviously that's in the confidential. However, I do feel that the job of councillors, or members, sorry, moving into that area is going to could increase for at least a period of time, and it will be before and after the council elections, as I said. And I also feel, and it will obviously be discussed later, that as members, we sort of have to work with the general manager and the chief biosecurity officer to work out what we're going to do about this ever increasing number of re-inspections that are actually, it's a snowballing effect a bit, and how we get through that, because I can just, if we look at the reports, we see where the inspections are going and how we deal with that. So there is more there. I'm certainly not on the county council here, to make money. I'm probably, if you're on getting $5, I'm probably getting $1 an hour. With a great extension.
Mr. Chair, I don't disagree with you.
But I also don't want to see the resources. I want to see the resources used on doing what we want to do, and that's get the weeds under control in our respective council areas, in the other Macquarie County council areas. So I have a mixed feeling. I come to this meeting having actually made a decision, having not made a decision one way or the other. I am a bit betwixt and between, because I do actually recognise that all of us have put in considerable time. I know, whether it's just, when we're driving down the road, sending a text or emailing, chief biosecurity general manager and saying there might be a problem on this road. We've certainly done a lot of hard hitting, as Councillor Cable said, in assisting to get the processes up and to get the register up, to get the evidentiary trail that will lead us hopefully to where we ultimately want to be. I mean, as we all know, our aim is to encourage and not have to go through the court system or anything to actually enforce. But, it gets to the stage where, and we'll discuss this later, we have no option. However, so I'm still betwixt and between, Mr. Chairman. I find it a very difficult position. But I also recognise that there is a considerable amount of work, and we have all contributed a lot of work, and I know how much I put into it. So it is a difficult decision. I can't do anything else but lay out my heart, that way.
No, look, look, I think everyone should have an understanding where I come from. Like everyone here has got to agree, and everyone said it, is the effort this group of 8 members, as unlike any county council I've been part of. I think this is the 4th term I've been in, and I don't say that lightly. The work that's been done for every part of this council has been phenomenal. You know, the Blaney boys, the work they've done up that way. You know, the questions that we've raised, people are not scared to ask questions. The effort that Council Member McKibben has put in lately, as people will find out with moving forward with what actions we're going to take. It's not an easy thing, and to say where I come from, I never got into council for anything but to do the best I can for the community I'm with, and remuneration was just one of those things to stand at the general manager with Bathurst. You know, it kept getting raised to the point he just buried it in the paperwork because I kept raising the question all the time. Yeah, I think everyone does deserve a lot more because everyone has worked so hard. Is it the right time? And that's where I'm conflicted at the moment. We've gone so far, we're seeing things turn around, and we've made this the #1 county council. So this would not be an easy call for anyone to make. Yeah, so I'm more than happy for you to speak more.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, I just put this up. Maybe we have a compromise. We have half the rate that Bruce has suggested, that sort of council rules.
It's all right, I'll get it right that time.
So that it's not such a big hit in one, because I think that's, you know, what we're basically doing is doubling.
It's just for, it's slightly over, yeah.
And I think 100% rise is in one lot is just probably a bit too dramatic. I think even 50% is high, but
when it's a low figure, it seems a lot higher, as we all know.
but I think you know, we could. Well, I think we could, if we had to justify the figure that Member Reynolds has put up. But I think perception is also important. And you know, I just think increasing the fees so dramatically is as I think Member Cable said, there's discussions with Deputy Mayor over. I'm just going to close.
We're frightened of him, aren't we?
I'm happy for other people to make comments. As I said, this is, you know, is anyone else, any members?
Just the government sets ranges for county council salary ranges bottom to top. We're nowhere near. We're way down near the bottom, aren't we?
Yes.
Yes.
But even doubling it still puts us
Halfway.
about halfway.
Well, yes.
I mean, I can't agree with. I think if you're going to, you either do nothing or you do the motion that's proposed. You don't muck around with it.
The one other option, if you decide not to go, as I said, I've moved Member Reynolds' notice of motion into submission because, as I've explained it to you. The other thing, as Member Reynolds made a comment, we as a group really would not see it, the next group would. We can adopt a management plan, operational plan moving forward, and it can be a point for the new council coming in as once the elected roles are put in place to have a discussion about it. Because budgets, as everyone knows, can be modified during the time if it so allows it.
I guess my response is that under the circumstances, I'm prepared to support, not prepared to. I believe that the Member Reynolds' position is the right position to take.
Yep. Member McKibben?
Thank you.
No, why not? Sure.
The Chairman, we have a second. I think that it's wrong to defer it to the new incoming members because they, of those who have who are currently here will know the workload. Anyone coming in will not know the workload and therefore cannot make an objective assessment at that time. The people around this table, and obviously we have two that are apologies today, we all know the workload because we've been through it, and it may very well be that some of that workload won't be as high in the future. I think some of it will certainly be quite high in areas. So I think it's wrong to defer it.
I'll just put that as another option.
I think it's this council, these members, the members here know the workload, can make a proper assessment of our workload. To leave it to a new council is not appropriate.
Fair enough.
I agree.
Member Reynolds, would you like to close the debate? Right,
So closing the debate on the
operational,
or
on the operational plan, which the submission is passed.
So I think broadly on the operational plan, I think it's a solid budget that has been proposed with this potential amendment, which would still leave us in a cash flow positive position, a surplus of approximately $25,000. And given that this year's budget was originally projected at a $707 surplus, $25,000 is still a very good forecast compared to what we were led to when we approved the last budget. So it still leaves us in a comfortable financial position. We are looking at fees, for example. So from a remuneration point of view, as in the new county council can continue to look at aerial operation, and rather than a 10% increase on cost, but maybe have a 15% if they need to cover operational costs. I'm not saying that that's the pathway that will go down, but if financially it's looking that it's going to become tighter, as the general manager has highlighted in the report. It's interesting in some of the comments that member Capel said, because I've also talked to a number of councillors in my council, and they've gone, no way would I ever become a Leeds County Council member, because you just, for the time and effort, there is no remuneration. So the other county council is very hotly contested, whereas this one is certainly not as hotly contested. Also, and I can only speak for my own council, but as in we are now at the maximum remuneration, and it's actually disappointing if the Deputy Mayor of Oberon has said that we shouldn't be receiving at least, well, in my proposal, 50% of the remuneration that we're entitled to with the job that we're doing. So either the Deputy Mayor of Oberon is very dissatisfied with the job we're doing, and which I will find is very, very, very disappointing, or he should be actually congratulating us and saying, job well done. I think that the future county councils on the pathway you have taken with We Control, you deserve to receive some form of remuneration that's more in line with the role that you take. So I encourage my fellow county councillors to support this motion or to amend the recommendation to include a $2,000, approximately $2,000 per county councillor increase in remuneration, plus a 2% for an increase in the mayoral allowance, which I have forgotten to mention. Sorry, the chair's allowance, not the mayoral allowance, Mr. Chair. I hope that my fellow county councillors will support it and still leave us in a good financial position with a budget with a projected surplus of around about $25,000. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Question.
No,
You've
Could I
called
ask, Mr. Chairman, what your views on this?
I did say that I'll re-comment that.
I think I heard what you said, but I'm not sure I heard what you said.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the General Manager, you've been sitting there and you've heard everything through, the impact of approximately 16,000, as Member Reynolds has said, as the current budget lies before us, you can make the budget stay within the scope of the budget, that we're on the right side of it moving forward. And if there's any problems during the 12 months period, we would be able to look at that as who the members are to address it at the time.
Mr. Chairman, I do agree with the assessment that Member Reynolds made in terms of we would still be operating on a surplus better than we'd projected previously. So it is coming from operating cash at this point. The comment in the report about the longer term impact was, of course, and I think I qualified it there, saying if all things remain the same. Now, I think we all know that things won't be quite the same in the future if we get to do what we want to do, as in more efficiently doing our aerial spraying programs and just generally improving the way the business runs. So I agree that we shouldn't look too far into the future at this stage for the purpose of saying don't spend it now. So financially, I don't see any particular problem. It's a decision for the council, and it would simply, if it's going ahead, you would just simply amend the recommendation as it stands and add the change and the increase in fees.
Which would be the, in the motion I brought across as a submission, which was Part B, increased member fees.
Effect with some slight tweak of the wording, but effectively, yes.
Yep. So all members fully understand that, and thank you, General Manager, for your. So, do you want the? I'll put it to you. Do you want the recommendations read out, or are you? Sorry,
We're okay.
you're okay. Okay.
We're pretty well modifying, just to clarify, Mr. Chair, we're modifying if the decision motion succeeded, that the second part of it, so we're modifying to include that as the
Part B is what I'm bringing in. That's, yeah, I'm bringing in Part B, the increase in member fees. That becomes a third point on the recommendation. And within that, as General Manager, you said, with a slight tweak of the words that you will take it out. You'll word it in a proper way for the recommendation to go through.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The only thing is I would add, I'd just simply merge the Part B in with recommendation 1, so that's clear it's an amendment to the exhibited version of the budget and operating plan. So if that's all right with the council.
Yes.
Can I just a query, Mr. Chairman? Now this operational plan has been on public exhibition.
Yep.
Is it the right thing for us to do now that that's been on public exhibition to make what is a significant change to it without going back to exhibition?
I'll base it on the line that I guess the 18 years I've been council and the budgets I've seen is that adjustments have been made at times within the budget when it comes before us because of submission. That doesn't go back out to the community. It is made on the night based on the submission and the discussion that's had on the floor and with member Gibbon.
But this, and I understand that, and I, as I said, I'm betwixt between on this, but my concern is that we put this, like Councillor Cable, we put this out on exhibition, the operating plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a normal, budgetary increase. It's actually something that is actually going to increase members' fees. So it is a matter, I would have thought, a material matter that should have been exposed to the public. But I ask you or the General Manager to comment on that.
So, General Manager.
Mr. Chairman, I think I have two views. One is I agree that the subject matter may be one that the public would have expected to be exhibited with the plan, and in that sense material, but often that sense of material is also the value in proportion to the total budget. And I really do think it's a decision for the council to decide whether or not they believe it is material, but there is some potential political kickback maybe, but you're all in a better position to judge that than me.
We don't want an Australian type situation.
So look, when it comes down to councillors, it's your vote. And everyone does know if it's been a council for a while, there are adjustments done in budgets at the time. I think the General Manager's commentary based around the fact if you were seeing $100,000 change, that without a doubt, I wouldn't be saying you're here now. I'd be saying, I need another meeting, I need to put it out in public exhibition. That is 100% correct.
May I just wrap up finally too, that the councils do also do with their QDRS each quarter, make changes of far more than this. As in some of our QDRSs in my council, many hundreds of thousands of dollars changes in a quarter.
Yeah.
So 16,000, as the general manager has highlighted, relative to the budget is a small proportional increase, but I do understand also where Capel and Tippett are coming from, that as in, there is a perception, but as in, we'll leave it
And
to
councillors, that is your vote, and they'll see it out. So everyone is comfortable what is before them. All for, please put your hands up. Against? I declare it carried. Thank you, councillors. So, Member Reynolds, when we come to yours, you'll just withdraw it.
Yes.
Okay, in the notice of motion. Thank you for your commentary, members. I keep saying councillors. Okay, item 3, biosecurity compliance and enforcement policy. We have a recommendation there. Council, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member McKibben, Member Reynolds, any commentary, members? Member McKibben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did get a couple of comments through to the general manager. I think it's clarified. I just thought that needed to maybe in section 14 be a little bit more clarity in a couple of areas. But
did you want to explain those out? I take it you've advised the GM. Would you like to?
Well, the first is I just think that all of these obviously speak for themselves. I was a little. So, for instance, if you were in 14.3, which is in the new one, I think it's clear that still gives us the right to go straight to court rather than to issue a PIN at all, as long as if the failure to comply with the direction, a biosecurity direction is so significant that we would go straight to court rather than issuing a PIN. I think that allows it, because it does state only with the issue of a penalty infringement note is only considered in conjunction with the issue of penalty infringement notice. I obviously wondered if the second thing applied, which I said, which was if we actually go straight to court proceedings, what happens? Can we then extend the compliance date for the existing direction if we are intending to go straight to court? But that's maybe a question that for some thought. The second thing is 3 obviously doesn't refer to the factors in 4C and D, but however, I'm assuming that but it says time cycle for notices and directions not subject to PINs. So if you have a biosecurity direction and you then issue a PIN and you have a period of drought and you were intending to issue a second PIN, or you're intending to go straight to court, you couldn't extend that time cycle for a drought period under 4, is that right? Because of the heading?
Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I firstly just clarify that whole section is written in the same way as sort of typically regulatory stuff is written, with the intention that all of the clauses need to be taken into account when considering any particular situation, which does make it let's say you need to read it 3 or 4 times before you get a really good picture of how it comes together. In relation, so for example, in the section 3 about direction extensions, the important part there is that when it's talking about penalty infringement notices, it's talking about directions only being extended, etc. But very importantly, after the brackets, in capital S, it says or, and that or is capturing the exceptional circumstances provided people have done a reasonable amount of work. So when this is saying you cannot extend a direction for no reason, just because you felt like it, when the property owner hasn't done any work or they haven't responded to an adequate level. The time cycle for notices and directions, it is, I'd have to just have a closer read, but it's quite possible that the point in brackets of not subject to pins could simply be removed to highlight the fact that those exceptional circumstances should probably apply regardless. Like they are taken into account in practice now. So if there's some uncertainty there, I'd be happy to remove that if that helped. And so that's 4. That's in the heading of 4. But in section 5 with the penalty infringement notice limitations, I suppose I took a bit of a shortcut there because it says in brackets is under normal conditions, but that isn't nearly as clear as the previous one that talks about extenuating circumstances. So, so 1 or 2 words might tidy it up. I'm not sure if the member's happy with that.
You could comfortably remove that in brackets, not subject to pins, with a bit of a clean up. Given.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just, so if we go back to 3, and maybe we use an example. So there's a direction on foot. We have a drought period. The landholder has done no work. Says to us, it's no use spraying blackberries. They're not going to die. Chemicals not going to work because we're in drought conditions, middle of summer. And we have let's say a seasonal conditions like 2 years ago. Now, in that circumstance, I read this as saying that you cannot extend the compliance date for that existing direction because the landholder has not successfully complied with the direction, or substantial work has been completed, like landholding assessed weed risk rating has dropped by 1. So the issues in 4, C and D could not be applied by a weed biosecurity officer. Have I got that wrong, Mr. General? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I think I understand where you're getting at. Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, I take the point, and it wasn't intended to be that way, but I think it appears as though it is. So I think that's where I say if we remove the not subject to pins, and probably need to just add another or into 3 and say or 4 applies. And I think that would then cover that off and do that's what we actually do.
Thank you.
And
yeah,
sorry,
you're right. You're right.
Because I did put some notes. I apologise. I only got through these board papers last night late. The rest of the week, as Council Cable knows, some we had very long council meetings, 12:30 at night or something like that. But in 5, the last paragraph. This says, and I want to clarify this. It says accordingly where appropriate, etc. But then the words at the end, for a difference offence may be issued from time to time. Now, it's talking about up to 2 further penalty infringement notices. Well, we've all always set, the guidelines say we can only issue 2. So it can't be that the word for, this is for a different offence. So we can only ever issue up to 2. So I'm unclear why the word further is in there.
Mr. Chairman, what we've talked about to date is that we issue a maximum of 2 pins for instance, somebody failing to meet the requirements of the biosecurity duty. And I know, you know, we're not trying to do 2 any more than we have to, etc., but we're working our way through that. But what this is saying is that failing to meet one's failing to comply with a biosecurity direction may not be the only problem we have with a landholder. And there are other offences that may apply, and I haven't got any particular examples in mind, but we don't want to imply in our policy that you can only issue 2 pins for anything. If a different offence applies, then it's totally, it's a related but unrelated issue. But when we're talking about penalties or pins, we need to be able to issue pins for different offences.
Absolutely agree with that, but I think it's just the word further. Accordingly, where appropriate, up to 2 penalty infringement notices for a different offence may be issued from time to time. It almost, I just don't know if the word further is getting us anywhere or it's confusing it.
Member McKibben, I might ask the Chief Biosecurity Officer to make a comment, please.
Through Mr. Chair, as the GM said, I think the meaning of what's trying to be written there is that we'd only fine twice for the one offence. So the one that we're chasing at the moment is failure to meet the biosecurity direction, which is the document. There's a second one, for example, which is failing to meet the biosecurity duty, which is separate to the document. That's the duty under the Act. So I think what the GM is trying to explain is that what he's trying to mean in this is that we don't want to get stuck with only being able to issue 2 ever and that's it, if there's something else that we could potentially.
I absolutely agree, yeah. And I thought we got there by saying for a different offence.
So further part is causing.
Yeah, just the word further.
Mr. General Manager, sorry.
Because we've got the words for a different offence, I think it speaks for itself.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to clarify that by simply removing accordingly and possibly putting in note, or it is noted that where appropriate, 2 and get rid of further penalty infringement notices. Like it's it, just tweak those wording a little bit to make it very clear, because it could be a bit obscure the way it is.
I'm happy with that, sir.
Yep. Other members? Yeah. Yep. Sorry, Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question, and I don't know the answer, so hopefully the gentleman.
What's your question?
Chief Biosecurity Officer may. Does this lock us in if we go 3 months, 6 months? If we don't meet that time frame and we're getting far behind with our current inspections, does that have an impact on potential, particularly if the individual went to court or appeal and said, well, you didn't follow your own directions, that it's taken you 12 months to come back. So this should be something else. Okay.
4D.
Okay. My second question, Mr. Chair, is with regard to extenuating circumstances. And I've noticed health has become one, and death has actually become is an extenuating circumstance, as in the landholder has died. But should there be some form of time frame when we go, okay, well, yes, there's been a death or you're ill, to even undertake some action, because you could have someone ill for 5 years that's unable to take the action, but which means that that property continues to pollute the neighbours with weeds, etc. So do we need to look at some form of, and I've noticed with a number of potential pins that have been withdrawn because of health or death as a reason, but where do we draw the line? And hopefully either the biosecurity officer, the chief biosecurity officer, or the general manager can sort of elaborate on when we would actually go, no, sorry, as in you either have to take some action or we will issue a pin.
Mr. GM, do you wish the Chief Biosecurity Officer to lead this?
If the Chief Weeds Biosecurity Officer could answer the second question, and I think I just need to hear the first question very briefly again. I had the gist of it, but if it's possible for Member Reynolds just to repeat the first question.
I think that was the 3 to 6 months. Was that the first question?
Um,
Sorry.
That was answered by, I think, Member McKibben pointed out point D.
So
right.
Withdraw.
Yes, it was withdrawn because point G.
Okay.
is General Manager.
Thank you. If the
That's
Chief Weeds
why it's when we take reaction again, basically.
With illness or death.
Yep.
in the state. So,
Please,
right?
yep,
Okay.
yep.
I was really waiting if someone does.
Or is it?
Okay, so normally the pin is withdrawn, but with the pin being withdrawn, shortly thereafter, a amended or revised direction is issued shortly thereafter. So it's not like we wait 12 months and then we issue something. We issue something shortly thereafter and give them a reasonable time without, we've still been practical for the council.
Well, could I ask clarification, if that's the case, and you said, you know, we would do this as the Chief Biosecurity Officer, if it was April it occurred, are we saying June, 2 months later, is a reasonable time to reissue a direction?
The direction, sorry, the direction would be issued shorter than that 2 months. Like, sorry, not the compliance date, but the time that it's posted out.
Yep.
Would be less than that time. The time frame at which the compliance date is due would have to take into account, obviously, whatever has occurred, plus any seasonal conditions if it's depending on the plan. But we're still trying to keep it short. We're not trying to blow it out too far. Is that a short answer or not really?
I guess I saw in confidential paperwork that a number of people withdrawn, so I just want clarification, which as in the Chief Biosecurity Officer has given me some clarification.
That's something we can comment on later in the confidential.
Yep. Member McKibben?
My concern is that it's something that's it's maybe part, well, it's not confidential really. We have under the Act, if we're going to prosecute someone, take them to court, the timeline starts running from the failure to comply with the biosecurity direction. And I'm just concerned, and we have to put all this in, as although we have to be seen to be fair and reasonable to people, give them the right opportunity to comply, and all those things, we have to bear in mind we have a 2-year limitation. Whether someone's sick or there are other extenuating circumstances. I just want to ensure that we are happy with the timelines we have put in here. And I know we've put more stringent timelines on ourselves because of that 2-year limitation. That we believe that we can move through this and still have sufficient time to take a court action against someone. I'd ask both the Chief Weeds Officer and the General Manager to comment on this.
Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Chairman, just on the issue of deceased estates, as the Chief Weeds Officer says, we do get onto that very quickly. It's very difficult to put absolute time frames on some of these things because the first thing that he has to do is actually identify who is the executor of the estate or what other property owner, etc. And that isn't always something that happens overnight. So this part of the policy, as you can see from the heading, and that's how it's meant to be, is a guide to issuing directions and penalty notices. And as such, the early qualification of saying it has to be on a case-to-case basis and it can't limit the general discretion of the authorised officer, which the Act basically says you can't, it needs to take in the circumstances. So this is not meant to be a precise procedure issued by the council because that would interfere with the ability to operate properly on the ground, but it is trying to make sure that the council can give reasonably tight constraints with that very objective of saying, well, if we don't get this right and we don't have it happen in time, we'll miss the opportunity to take someone to court when that's where it ought to be. So we just need to be careful about tightening up too many things, but make sure it's clear what our objective is.
Member McKibben.
We have to be careful though that if we end up in court, someone doesn't say, well, this is your compliance and enforcement policy.
Mm.
Have you violated it?
And that's why it's important, Mr. Chairman, that it isn't too prescriptive but gives enough guidance. So it does have to be implementable, but I agree, there is that risk. Somebody will in court try to use it against us. There's no question about that.
But we as a county council also made the comment, it looks like we could be, you know, in the near future, be the first county council to test this act. We don't know until we test it, the strength of it.
Mm.
And the same issue we're talking here, we don't know until potentially that occurs, if it could occur. You know, putting something maybe silly out there, do we need something in there like you see in people's insurance if you have a terminal illness or death or that? It's actually stopped there and a brand new compliance, a brand new review is done and a 2 year after that. Is if circumstances occur, it actually, that's fully gone, and when we start and say, I'll just grab a figure 2 months' time, that's when the two years start, not before that other work. Is that a potential to be in our documentation?
Yeah.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing we have to realise in relation to the pins and directions and stuff is that it does specifically relate to an individual person. So you don't serve these notices or directions on the property, it's on the person who is the owner or legal occupier. So that means that when you have issued a PIN to a person who turns out to have just recently passed away, then to some extent you have to start again. But our practice is we don't go back to a weed control notice, we just revert straight to a new direction in the name of the correct person, who could be the executor or a new property owner or otherwise.
Can I ask another dumb question then? It's like if someone sells the property, if Member Kingham sells his property to me, the notice that was on him, does it start new with the new owner of the property? Was it a different name?
Start again.
To start again. So the person who owned, unfortunately a death in the family and the son takes over,
For the estate.
the estate, it has to be a new direction. So do we need to have that in there if it's a death that it's yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Sorry, it speaks for itself. So if there's already a PIN on a property and that owner passes and a new owner inherits the place effectively, that new owner would then be issued with a fresh direction. But that means that they're not going back to start one. They're picking it up partway through.
So it may only have it 12 months
The
later.
issues that caused the PIN in the first place are still there.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go back to prove it all, because you've done that proof already.
Yeah.
And so you can just start from where you like, in a sense.
Yeah.
And in that circumstance, the estate of the person who's died is still liable to pay the debt for the PIN. And this is one of the reasons that we're trying to encourage our respective councils, when there is a sale as part of their purchaser inspection process, that they come to Lisa, to the administration coordinator, to find out whether there are any notices on the property. In respect to works. So, and if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman, as I know it's slightly off topic, could I ask the administration coordinator whether all councils are now on board?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, that's good.
That's good.
That's good. Excellent.
So members, Member McKibben, so are you comfortable where we're at and what's been said, or do you want?
No, I'm comfortable with where we said. I think the general manager's agreed to tweak a few things. Clarity. I'm happy with that, and I'm happy. But I do think that if we have to proceed in the court proceedings, etc., well, we may have to tweak some of this again, hopefully not, but because I think it's pretty robust. But, I do want to make sure that we keep, and we need to keep this and monitor this, that we have sufficient time to not go over our 2-year limitation period. Because, you know, if we look at some of the dates currently, where directions, etc., have been issued, you know, they have gone on for quite a period of time. And we have to bear in mind, it's not the issue of PIN, it's when the breach occurred, which is the failure to comply with the biosecurity direction.
Yep. So members, we had a move and a second, that we've had the debate. You've sought a recommendation there, all four. Against carried, thank you very much. Item 4, procurement policy amendment fleet. We have a recommendation there. Can I move a second? Move Member Reynolds, was it? Yep.
So we dealt with
Member-
position 2 then, was it? That's inspection. Is that?
It's all part of the
That's
recommendation.
part of it?
That's all part of that.
We want to talk about that. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I'll put it. I need a second. I've got a mover. Is there a second or third? Item 4. Member Reynolds, Member Cable, second. Any commentary, councillors, on the procurement policy? Yep, Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's actually come up with a good policy to use the fleet and at the same time get the maximum value out of the fleet and still have a reasonable resale value in the vehicle, and will hopefully impact in a positive way on our bottom line, as well as provide vehicles that are adequate and with some of the conditions there that about 7 dot points. To make them, particularly reliability and the factors of choosing a new vehicle, to make sure they're practical for our readers, inspectors, and also longevity, so that that's a good win-win that the chief biosecurity officer might add, whether he sees this as a policy that's workable for our staff.
Chief Biosecurity Officer, any commentary?
For you to share. I think this is heading in a good direction, and that we're getting suitable with vehicles that we need. We're trying to extend the life of the vehicles without overextending them to get the best call it run for our dollar out of the vehicles.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with this, that price shouldn't be the only determinant. In fact, it's not, I agree. You know, if you buy quality vehicles, you know, and we're not, a lot of the terrain we have to travel on these shires is not easy terrain on vehicles, takes a big toll. I know from my own property, so and the terrain. And if you get quality, strong, chassis, good vehicle, it usually lasts a lot longer. I might even buy it second hand. And yes, probably driving as well. So I agree with this. I suppose the question also is, we talk about having, you know, having to fit it where appropriate, fitting the vehicles. I don't know if, you know, what the experience is, and we have to look at, is it worth fitting bull bars? Is it worth, I don't know. We may have not had any kangaroo damage, because we may be not using these vehicles all at night or other things, so it's probably not worth it. But we obviously have to keep an open mind on these things, because obviously panel beating is expensive, and if we have a high incidence, then we seriously have to look at something like that.
Yep, fair enough.
That's right. The difference between 5 and 7 years for a car, you shouldn't have much maintenance problems in a new car over that time, and beyond that time you start having increased maintenance costs. So you're judging the length of time you keep the car with the increasing maintenance costs, and I think your 5 to 7 years is better right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say, good policy with enough flexibility in there to fit it to our needs. So
Very good. Recommendations there, councillors, all 4. Against carried, thank you. Item 5, legislative compliance register. We have a recommendation there. Can I move a second? Member Reynolds, Member Leslie. Any commentary, councillors? No? All for? Against, carried. Thank you. Item 6, County Council meeting schedule for 2021. The recommendation is I'll move it second. Member Kingham, Member McKibben. Any comment? Member Leslie?
If I may, I went to last night to the candidates information session of the council. I went to it was that night, and there was a statement then made that the caretaker time for councils is 40 days. Well, the meeting on the 6th of August is within that 40-day caretaker period, which if you date back from the 4th of September, that's less than 40 days. I was wondering what's your thoughts, Mr. Chairman, perhaps the General Manager, on that issue.
My thoughts only is talk to my General Manager of Bathurst Regional Council this morning again, and basically the way it is read and that basically if the council was to go into increased loan borrowings or something very much out of the normal, you're not to enter into issues of high significance. So it's a normal standard type operational type policy, might be DA, things that we do where if we were to go in and all of a sudden we push in, we want to push half of our budget, move down this area into this area, you can't do that sort of thing. I haven't heard that 40 days. I know it's in there. Every council I think has got an August meeting, and the main stipulation is that you can't enter into major agreements, and that's the way I've always read and understood it. Member McKibben.
I ask Mr. Chair, through you, the General Manager, do we envisage any major issues coming up for the 6th of August meeting that may have material impact on the council moving forward?
Mr. Chairman, the short answer is no. The key item in a governance sense is that we will be putting the financial statement certificates to the council for the chairman and GM to sign off, allowing or authorising the auditors to then do their audit. So that's fairly normal. Beyond that, it'll be particularly routine reporting and updating as to where we've got to at the end of the year. So possibly draft annual reports and obviously the status of where we got to with all of our biosecurity during that period.
Member McKibben.
Noting some of the confidential issues that we will look at later today, would any of those need to come back and be considered a material issue? And in fact, what I was suggesting is if we do consider there's any likelihood, maybe we should move the meeting to the end of July. I don't envisage it.
I wouldn't envisage it, and I think we can, through the General Manager and the staff, can have a look at if they feel an issue. I'd be more worried if we were bringing tenders in. We just spoke about a fleet, and if we would say we're going to take Lithgow Motor Group over Blaney Motor Group or whatever, we can't be making decisions like that. I wouldn't see it as an issue at all, because it is our standard operating discussions that we're making in the running of this council. So my determination is that no, it wouldn't. Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the next meeting is to be at Blaney, which is fantastic. One suggestion, though, as in for our far-flung councillors, that whether a vehicle or two may be able to leave Bathurst to take the councillors to, so that they only have to drive through, etc. There may be one or two vehicles to be able to leave, to cut down the driving, particularly for the Lithgow councillors and the overall councillors.
Could I request on behalf of Councillor Capel and myself that the Kalula Road be graded by Blaney Council so that we would have a smooth ride to Blaney rather than the serrated, absolutely serrated disaster that's there now.
Can I just say that I've only had 2 discussions in the last week and a half.
Oh, and Chief,
Can I just say on that funny but serious note, I've actually asked my GM and the Director of Engineering to look at in the near future, put a letter to Blaney to talk to maybe our two councils coming together to get the Kalula Road sorted out. I think we need to get it.
It's a major.
We need to get it
It's a
sorted.
major.
But anyway, that's just the
On
side.
Tuesday and Wednesday, if you've got camel trucks coming,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
go everywhere.
Yeah. So anyway, that's something I've asked them. I'll grab you in a second, Mr. GM. Member Reynolds.
So following on, as in, to answer Member McKibben's comments, it has been brought up in the council workshop in Blaney, the state of the road. On a more serious note, I have been approached by some landowners who are interested in coming, and also potentially the Newcrest mine may be wanting to have a representative or two come. But how they're able to have a conversation at the beginning or the end, or how we actually structure it, and I know we do have a policy, but so that I can tell them to come at 2:30 or to come at 2, or how we are going to do it so we can engage with local community.
I'll let the general manager take you through. First on, we would need to follow what the rules are of Blaney as far as their room, and then adopting ours within the Blaney council's guidelines. 1 second, Member McKibben, Mr. GM.
Mr. Chairman, what you just said is the actual fact. So we would need to know what the constraints were in the particular building that we were meeting in. So I'm talking about the COVID related social distancing, etc. And beyond that, our normal code of meeting practice would apply. So therefore, there would be the opportunity for, so if you can accommodate members of the public in the particular venue, then they would be able to make presentations subject to complying with our requirements, which is notice in advance, etc. Or they can sit in and listen to the meeting.
Look, yeah, Blaney's got 7 councillors. We've got 8 here, and we'd have less staff members turning up. Surely there won't be an issue at all.
So to answer the general manager's comment, Mr. Chair, I assume we would be using the chamber, and the chamber can accommodate probably about 50 members of the public under COVID restrictions. So that's not an issue, but it's more the time frame, etc. Mr. Chair, whether
that's where I would ask our senior administrative officer to discuss, maybe through you and your GM, the guidelines, and to be able to get the information. Member McKibben.
Thank you, Mr. Field. Look, with some of these opportunities, I know there's a meeting coming up at over on November. I just wonder whether it would be helpful, because of the restrictions we have with obviously meetings, to have a more informal workshop or anything where people can raise issues before the meeting, so that it's not part of the meeting, in a more informal, so that we started at, I don't know, 1:45 or something. That's just a suggestion. That's really a matter for members Kingham and Member Kingham's nodding his head no.
Well, I don't think it's an issue, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
They make a presentation before the meeting, or in the meeting, but at the beginning of the meeting. There's no restrictions in the Blaney chamber.
We haven't got a per meterage how many public can come in there. You have to make that. So you do have limitations. That's why I said we need to work with whatever your limitations are. Yeah, but if we come into our regional council, there's 12 and that's it. We have a ballot, the first 12 get so-called purchase their tickets. So whatever Blaney does, we will fit within our guidelines of Blaney. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but we must follow ours within theirs if we're going into their chambers. Members, any other commentary? Okay, all 4? Against carried. Item 7, code of meeting practice update. There's a recommendation there. Could I have a move and a seconder, members? Member McKibben, Member Caper. Any commentary, members?
Just briefly, what's the difference?
Mr. GM?
Mr. Chairman, the only difference is that whereas members were allowed to attend via an audio video link for the last 12 months or so, that is no longer available for a county council. But I understand the government's looking at the regulations with a view to changing it so that under undefined extenuating circumstances in future, individual members could participate remotely in order to be involved, but they might be travelling or ill or otherwise. But at the moment, county councils are being treated differently again.
Any further? If there's not, members, all for, against, carried. Thank you. Item 8, weed biosecurity functions. There's a recommendation there. Could I move a second of members? Member Leslie? Yep. Member McKibben? Any? Member Kingham, I'll let you start this time. Will you?
Mr. Chairman, I made an application to receive confidential information. It's not happening. I'm still waiting with this council. Looking at this, I have no idea who's been inspected. I raised those issues at the last meeting. I sent photos every week to you, Mr. Chairman. I got a reply from the general manager, which I regard as unsatisfactory. And I just don't believe that I have a handle on what sort of inspections and what status the properties are in the Blaney Council in particular. So I'm just wondering why I'm not getting more information than what's put through here.
I want to clarify, I haven't seen pictures of you for a few weeks. You were sending me pictures on a regular basis, which I was responding to.
Mr. Chairman, you and the general manager said that they may not be able to be inspected because I'm first inspected.
No, I'm just answering what you said, that you've been regularly doing. I haven't received any for a number of weeks. Well, I'm answering.
Last meeting, because I got an unsatisfactory reply from general manager who even indicated the properties may be hard to find. But
Mr. General Manager.
I just find that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how many times I need to address this or whether I should address it now, but if you wish me to comment, I will.
Well, I think I would like you to make a comment.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, the last time I met with Member Kingham, he made it very clear that the information I was providing him was not adequate and it was not suitable for his purposes. I explained that I don't have some of the information that he's requested because it doesn't exist. He insisted that it must exist because it used to, but I don't have it. I don't have access to it. So I'm not going to waste my time providing information that he clearly doesn't want.
Member McKibben.
Could I suggest this conversation occur in confidential? Because it is.
I'm happy to have the discussion when we get before I come out of confidential.
I think it'd be more separate confidential because obviously examples, etc.
We can't bring examples and I will shut it down if anyone tries to bring that in here. So I was happy because it is an item here. Member Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have concerns about the amount of inspections we're doing. In looking at this report, and there are two different figures for a start. As in the first paragraph has been 1,297. I then do the sum across the bottom, I get to 1,312. So why are there two different figures on the reports? Is my first question.
Mr. Chairman, the figures in the columns relating to each individual council are the ones that come straight from our worksheet, and it may be that the addition of the totals was incorrect, and if so, it's my responsibility.
Next question, Mr. Chair. For the first 9 months, I've looked at the previous report, we were doing 140 inspections a month for 9 months. The last 2 months, we've done 35 or 18 or 17 and a half a month. And in the report, it does say that we are down an inspector, but we were down an inspector from late last year. Why has there been a collapse in the last 2 months in the number of inspections when we've got such a big backlog of inspections?
I'll ask the Chief Biosecurity to answer.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Are you saying 35 inspections for last month in total?
Well, Mr. Chair, it depends which figure you take. As the bottom figure is 50 over the last 2 months, so 25 a month. For the 9 months, the 11 months report, we've done 50 on one count, or 35 if you take 1297. extra inspections since the report to the last county council meeting at the 9-month mark. It really concerns me, even if it is 50, that's 25 a month compared to 140 a month is the first 9 months.
Give me 2 seconds. Nathan.
Yep, please, Nathan. Just one second. Kevin, while we're opening this document.
Halfway down, it does say 117 re-inspections were completed in April, May. I'm assuming, I'm not sure. I was also going to comment on the level of re-inspections in that we still had a huge backlog, and I actually expected the figure of re-inspections to be higher for April and May than even 117, because we had a large backlog. That's what I suggested before. We have a snowballing event. If we can't get on top of these re-inspections, we're going to get to spring again, and we're going to have a huge number of re-inspections and not be able to start any new inspections. We discussed this as to whether we need to put up something else in place or do something. I still have the same fear I had at the last meeting.
Yep. Mr. GM, and then I'll go.
I'm not thinking about whether we've done 35 or 117 over the last 2 months, which is 50 odd months. I'm concerned the number still to be done. And, you know, we've got, well, the position in March, you know, in B, we've sort of got 433 re-inspections by 30th of June, 545 by December the 31st. So I'm still getting worried about these.
Mr. GM, and then I'll go to see security.
Mr. Chairman, where those, if I'm reading the right section, where it refers to 117 re-inspections, just remember that that little section there is only talking about re-inspections, not about actual first inspections, which there were a number. And there's definitely been more than 100 inspections each month in those 2 months. But equally, there's no doubt that we have been doing less inspections in the last couple of months, and it's all tied up to the fact that we've been doing so this is ex-linear reserve. So we've been doing a lot of the roadside re-inspections following the spraying program and preparing for next one. And we have been actually effectively 2 people down because we've had 1 person on leave all of May for personal reasons. And we've had our new officer starting, who is starting to crank up, but hasn't obviously come to full speed yet. So there's no question that in recent times, the inspections have dropped, but we've been very busy with other stuff, including the aerial finish off and the program with Crown Lands, the program with Bathurst Regional Council. So as I've said a few times, we can only be in one place at a time, and it's not just a matter of putting 3 more people on tomorrow. We don't have vehicles for them, and they take a long time to train. So we've just got to keep on going where we've said we are, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Chief Fire Security Officer.
Yeah. Sorry for you.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the level of inspections is increasing. The level of re-inspections is greatly increasing. The last month, there was 116 re-inspections and 28 new inspections. So that obviously hasn't come through into this year because we're a month. So we are steadily increasing the inspections. The re-inspection lists are getting shorter and shorter because we're not adding a vast number of new inspections to the list. We're prioritising obviously the re-inspections first, and then in the re-inspections we're also prioritising those that are at a PIN status before those that are a direction status, that are those that are legal. So we're prioritising the higher levels and working back, and we can see that progress and where we sit.
But for a lot of these, where you have a re-inspection and where you issue a PIN, for instance, you then have to do a further re-inspection after you've issued the PIN to see actually whether they've done any work. and then we may issue another PIN, or we may go straight to court.
Which is, sorry,
Yes.
So
which is,
that's what I'm talking about, the snowballing.
I know, and sorry,
Yeah, you're right.
that is what we were trying to explain 2 or 3 years ago, is that yes, there's the initial inspection. If they do the work after the initial inspection, that's fine. That's 2 minutes out of the system. If they're reluctant to do anything and we've got to keep following the step, as you said, that's where you've got to keep going back, and that's where we need to prioritise the re-inspections and prioritise the further they are through the re-inspections. Sorry, Mr.
So, did you have another point? Because there's been Member Reynolds and.
I did. I'm wondering if we've had a situation of personal leave, and it's been for a month. Do we need to train up a casual that we can bring in, because we would have a vehicle available if someone's on leave or thing, to be able to fill in that spot while that person's on leave? I don't know, but do we have a resource to be able to call on who is reasonably trained? I don't know whether that's an option.
Mr. GM, is that a potential?
Mr. Chairman, it's. I think the advice from the 2 people either side of you is that you can't just bring people in off the street. They need to be working on it sort of at least consistently, even if it was part-time, and they need to really know what they're doing, or they create more problems than they solve. You know, in the inexperienced officers using the technology, if they make a few errors, it creates all sorts of problems for following up the evidence record and the ability to get useful reports out of the system. So that's how I understand it. It's a good idea, but I don't know how we make it work in practice.
So with the number of re-inspections due by June, when do you envisage that they will be completed?
Chief Biosecurity Officer, your best estimate to when that will be done?
Because I'd say, by my calculation, we're still going to have about 150 in September at the least.
I know that we're working with the staff and looking at their re-inspection, their individual re-inspection lists. The majority of the staff are whatever they can physically inspect now, as in what's due now, they have caught up with that. What's going to come through next month, they should be able to catch up with that, and then what comes through the next month, because they can't go and inspect stuff that isn't due yet.
Yeah. And these are all the re-inspections, so which will compound the effect on inspections.
Yeah, but they're pretty well up to date as far as they can be, because they can't go inspecting stuff that isn't due yet. We can't go and issue someone with the next step if they're still.
But we've got 433 re-inspections due by the 30th of June. 433, that's what the statistics say here. And by the 31st of December, we've got 545. So if we've got 433 by the 30th of June, let's say we're doing, what do you say, 100 odd a month?
Yep.
We've got July, August, September. 3 months, 100. We're still going to have 195 left. 133 left, sorry.
While he's looking at some figures, Member Reynolds.
Mr. Chair, on what the Chief Biosecurity Officer has told us, I'd like this report to be represented to councillors, because there's just so much inaccurate information in this report. It says for the 11 months through till the end of May, I assume it's 11 months in the 2021-22 financial year. And so we've had totally different figures from what is presented in front of us. I'd actually like to see how many properties still need to be re-inspected, whether it is 433 by June, which is only a month or 2 weeks away, and 545 by December, which I assume is included in that 433, or is it extra? But could we actually get an accurate report presented to county councillors, county council members, on where we're up to, what we're going to do? I suppose the Chief Biosecurity Officer may be able to answer that question.
Can I just ask one question? On the business paper, it's stating a number right into June, right? No. Okay. Going by the staff register effectively, like, yeah. That number is slightly different. Remembering too that the number that the GM has quoted, we're on average a month or more ahead of that number. Whatever he's quoted at this point in time, but we've kept working until the meetings occurs. So that number the staff are working off is a month ahead of.
So we've had 17 days of June. What's the day? 18. So 18 days of June. So you wouldn't have to days here. So in the 17 days of June, it's open above these figures because they say they're at the 31st of May. How many inspections have been done in the last 17 days?
Have you got that there?
I can't see the exact number.
Mr. GM, could I ask that at the earliest convenience, Monday, Tuesday next week, no later, but we get the latest figures to where we're at to all the members and an email to them. And a projection of where we're going to be by 30 of June.
End of June, and where we're going to be in
September. Yep, Mr. GM.
Mr. Chairman, first, I'd just like for the record to correct the fact that the property inspection profile here is accurate from the register as at the 31st of May 2021. And as the Chief Weeds Biosecurity Officer says, the staff are working off current information since that time. Based on this information, which was accurate on that day, you've got 545 re-inspections, maybe it's give or take one, before December. Now, depending on what else we do, aerial programs, roads, etc., if all the staff are working on it, then they should have that 545 under control by the end of the year without too much of a problem. And that's only requiring around, less than 100, but it does also then get impacted by new inspections or other re-inspections that have short timeframes, like we're introducing in our policy. So as we do some inspections, we actually create more. New inspections create new re-inspections, and re-inspections may simply roll over into another one. So whatever the figure is today, it won't be the same tomorrow. It will either have gone up, down, or in between.
Member Capel, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Now, I think we have to accept that with what we're doing, there's going to be a lot of man hours taken up with each subsequent inspection, assuming that it's a non-compliant one. If the first inspection or second inspection gets a tick, that's easy. If it doesn't, there's going to be more man hours go into every inspection. The closer we get to legal action of any kind, the more work has to go into it. And I think that we as a council just have to accept that this is a very time-consuming operation the further you get down the track.
Very true.
And the other thing is that re-inspections really have to take precedence over new inspections while there's any backlog at all.
Yep. Thank you.
And I think we've got to accept the General Security Officer's statement that then the work is kept on coming.
And people do have holidays.
Yes.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair. We obviously will have an aerial, well, it seems we'll have an aerial program coming up in the spring. Obviously, we've engaged a resource to assist us with that, but it's still going to impact on our biosecurity officers. So it's highly likely, if the program is usually in October, September, October, somewhere around, that we could have a month or a month and a half of reduced level of inspections from what's happened previously, even with the additional resource issue.
and that's where I guess
I think that's going to be the biggest impact on.
and it's going to be a balancing act. is it the fact we haven't done more inspections, but we're getting through the re-inspections, and we're talking in confidential about the enforcement action moving forward, that we need to follow our guidelines to the letter of the law, so to speak. That there could be less inspections, but we're going through the re-inspections and actually getting to that stage where we'll be taking action, which, as Member Capel said, the more we get down the path, the more its potential man hours to be put into it. And one is going to impact the other, and also human, being on holidays, sick leave, and other events that occur, bad weather, snow, whatever. There's going to be a whole lot of impacts that occur. But I can understand where the members are coming from, frustrations at the moment, but we've also got to understand that the staff are doing everything within their power to do the inspections and re-inspections, which is what we have got to our stage of this council, and we've been pushing them. But we want you to do this, we want you to do the second one, we want you to do your documentation properly. So if we have to take action, it has all been done properly. There's going to be impacts on various stages and on different areas of it. Member Reynolds?
Two quick questions, Mr. Chair. Or
Yep.
Firstly, I think with the general manager's comment that the table, I understand the general manager said the table is correct. Blaney's inspections dropped from 197 after 9 months to 155 after 11 months. So what happened to all those inspections that were allegedly taking place by the end of the 9 month, the third quarter? And hence why I ask if we can get a proper report. So I guarantee a report next week to actually, as in with
Where we're
correct
at.
data.
Where we're at.
Yep. The second question, so as long as that's agreed that the general manager or the chief fire security officer,
Yeah.
or
Yes, we get that report.
where we're at.
Where we're at, say, yeah, as a close of business today, if they give it to you on Monday or Tuesday. Sorry? How, sorry, what do you mean?
Hasn't given the report on Monday.
Well, can we give a report on Monday or Tuesday where we're within a day or two of being exactly accurate? Can you put that out based on that?
I'll need to run a different report together. This is.
Yep.
Yeah.
That you can, okay.
Second question, which comes from the last meeting, where we're discussing about targets, and which also had budget implications. So I'll just look at the target side of it. We were discussing if we weren't going to meet our targets with regard to the WAP funding, whether we could roll over, or there was a potential of rolling over some funds and maybe employing someone for 12 months if we roll some of those funds over rather than declaring a major surplus. I was wondering whether the general manager or chief fire security officer could tell us whether there is still that potential to roll over funds, and whether there is the option to bring another person on for, say, a 12-month process if there was rollover plus our annual WAP funding that will come for next financial year.
Mr. GM?
Mr. Chairman, obviously at this point in time, given the year hasn't finished, we can't be sure of the exact quantity of assessments or the funding to do with WAP and how it was spent. However, the situation is still generally there in that there is a mechanism for us to do that as we settle the accounts for the year. And it simply involves disclosing, if it's correct, that we carry forward some money related to some particular work, but it's not possible to reconcile it yet. And if we did do that, then and it's probably end up being a QBRS issue, but we would probably have enough money between the operating surplus, the WAP carryover, and involvement in our other officers on the aerial and roadside programs to fund somebody for a year. But the trouble we have is, what are they going to drive around in? So it's one thing to get an officer, but we don't have an extra vehicle. So it starts to introduce those issues, and to hire a vehicle isn't cheap. To purchase another one or retain one is another burden on the budget as well. So there's a few things to be sorted there.
I think it should be investigated.
Okay.
I do, because I think I'm worried that the aerial program and everything are going to have a huge, and I know we're going to train someone, but I'm very worried about where we're going to be in the deal.
Mr. Jam, could you make that, to review that and come back to us as soon as possible, please?
Mr. Chairman, what sort of timing are you thinking of? Because we don't have enough information to give you a definitive report at this stage. As I just said, we know that there are people out there that you could recruit, but we obviously have to entice them with a valuable job. I suppose I can certainly give you a scenario, but I have nothing definitive just at this moment.
Well, scenario of what indicatively we'd have to pay, what indicatively we'd have to get a vehicle for them, what, you know, it's going to be X number of weeks training, so they're going to be useless for a period of time. Expect the person that they need training. So we need a little scenario and then some commentary as to, you know, feasibility and whether it is feasible for the general manager. As I said, my concern is we're going to have weed inspectors tied up on aerial program again. And I know it takes time to train someone as well. You know, you can't just, you do send them out with another inspector for a period, etc., and all those sorts of things, but you still got to train. I know that takes time away from people otherwise doing inspections, but I just think, as I said before, this thing's going to snowball. We've got to look at somehow getting on top of it so we can get back to initial inspections again and look at things like Councillor King and Member King was raised. You know, we have to look at a way around this. You know, it may end up not being feasible, but I don't think it. I think we have to look at it from a resource point of view.
Mr. Jam, you understand that? Thank you.
Yes, that's. I will work on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Two final things, Mr. Chair. One is maybe the August meeting, even though we can't make any financial decisions, or whether this is constituted as a major financial decision. And secondly, with the vehicle, that maybe we bring forward the purchase of one of the vehicles that we're looking at 12 months out and use it for 12 months for a person, and then put that into that vehicle position. So we would have only a minimal impact on the budget if we were to just have them engaged for 12 months or 10 months or whatever the time period is.
You got that, Mr. Jam?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not quite clear. Does that mean purchase a new vehicle that we were getting ready to trade in, but hang on to the trade-in for a short period? Is that the point?
Mr. Chair, my suggestion was to probably purchase an extra vehicle, but 12 months in advance of when the next vehicle that you were going to purchase, and then swap that over to the vehicle that you were going to trade in 12 months' time. You still may be trading it in, as in, but maybe slightly lesser price, who knows?
Okay. Well, if you're looking into all aspects, Mr. GM, councillors, members, if you're looking into all aspects, that the vehicle comes into it. So look, if you can look in that aspect of it as well, please.
Yes.
Yes.
If this is considered a major decision and has to come to the August meeting, we decide it is a major decision, then I suggest we bring the August meeting back again to end of July if we have to. You don't think it's a major implication?
Oh, let me sit down and talk with some people. And yeah, I'll get some clarification. I'll talk to General Manager on that.
Will be impact on attendance. That's the only.
Sorry.
If we did bring it forward, then I've got to let people know that they're interested in it.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. If I was bringing it forward, I'd probably be tending to look at maybe to keep that standard, and maybe if it has to be an extraordinary meeting and try to keep everything standard, and we just come together to go through it. But anyway, I'll work through that, members. Any other commentary, members?
Yes, I think we have to stay ready to put it really good. Running this council is a long-term business. It's something that you plan, you know, what you're going to do in December, what you're going to do this time next year. Your inspections is something that you're planning ahead on an orderly basis for some time, and yet here we are rushing through things, trying to second guess or to micromanage the process. I think we're going off beyond our ambit as members of this, becoming somebody who's trying to do the work of others, and I'm uncomfortable about this process of trying to get the door like this. So I'm happy about the conversation we've been having. I think we need to trust and respect the staff we've got here, and know that they know what we want, they know what we're trying to do, they know the resources we've got, and let's give them a bit of a, let's give them a break.
Really noted. Thank you. Councillors, we have a second recommendation. All for? Against? Carried? Against? Council, sorry? You're against? As well? Yep, please record that. Councillors, now due to get into confidential committee as a whole.
What we do, Mr. Chair, could I suspend standing orders to rescind or to remove item number 11, so that we don't have to come back to deal with it at the end?
That was your one, wasn't it?
Yes.
What we can do, we had one at our meeting the other night that the council got up and said, I'll withdraw my
So I'm happy to withdraw it if the other two
Yep.
members, seconders, are happy to withdraw it.
Well, we've dealt with it that way, yes. Yeah, could I have a motion to go to confidential committee as a whole, please? Go and move the seconder. Member Leslie, member Kingham, all for? Against carried.
Sorry.
Can you, yeah, no, you're right. Sorry. Oh, okay. Is the recording stop?
Not yet.
You don't normally talk to me, no, go on. Okay. Mr. General Manager, can you read out the results of the issues over confidentiality, please?
Mr. Chairman, in relation to item 9, biosecurity risk register, Council notes the Weed Biosecurity Risk Register report as at May 31st, 21. In relation to the notice of motion on enforcement action, the Upper Macquarie County Council take unprecedented enforcement action against an appropriate landholder that has to date substantially failed to meet their biosecurity duty. The action will be taken as a test case and as per the stage process set out in the notice of motion. And Mr. Chairman, I presumed that the Chairman's late report was noted.
Yes. Council, could I have a motion to adopt the recommendations of the confidential committee, please? Member Gibbon, member Capel, all for? Against carried. Yeah. I now have a motion, the recommendations of the committee as a whole be adopted. Could I have a member Gibbon, member Reynolds, all for? I declare the meeting closed at 5:15. Thank you, members, again for valued debate.
No problem at all. Stop. It's still recording.
David, I sent you. Before I write back, so don't read the email. They're not now.